There's a lot of talk these days about people wanting to hear the truth, to know the truth. In fact, someone tweeted the other day that they wanted the absolute truth. Now, absolute truth is not something we as humans can obtain. We can never know the entire story behind something. We can never know all the facts involved in any particular situation. That characteristic would only belong to someone who is all knowing, and we would call that God. Now, today I want to talk about a Bible story about Samuel. And Samuel's story is in one of the historical books of the Old Testament. And yes, there is history in the Bible. Not all books are history, but some of them are. And so if you say you don't believe in the Bible, in reality, you're saying that there's history in there that you do not believe. There's history in there that tells truth, and there's stories in the Bible that are meant to portray truth. Sometimes through story, it's the only way we can speak a truth. So Samuel, many of you know this story of the little boy who was born to Hannah, who was barren. And Hannah made this deal with God that if he would give her a son, that she would dedicate him to God. And so she bore a son and took him to the temple, to Eli, the priest in the temple, and left him there to serve the Lord under Eli, the priest. Many of you know the Christian song, "Here I Am, Lord. I have heard you calling in the night." That story is taken from the story of Samuel. Now, in order to know someone's story, part of it is the historical setting into which they were born. And Samuel was born into a time, as it would say at the end of the book of Judges. He was born into a time when there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what they felt was best. We could say a time when everyone had their own truth. The other thing about this time was that the priests were corrupt. And so, through a man of God who spoke to Eli, God told Eli that even though he had promised that his family would be priests, serve at the altar forever, that the Lord was angry. And because the sons of Eli had not listened to Eli telling them to change, that they continued to be corrupt, that the Lord would allow them to die. It's into this scene that Samuel was born and grew up. Now, one night, I should say, Samuel heard his name being called, and so he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am." Why did you call me? And Eli says, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. And it happened again, and it happened again. And finally, Eli recognized that it was the Lord himself who was calling Eli. And he told, or that was calling Samuel, and he told Samuel to go to sleep. And if he was called again, he should say, Speak, your servant is listening. And over time, Samuel matured in his calling, and he found favor with God and with others. And so God sent a vision, a revelation to Samuel. And this also was a time when revelations and visions were few. And Samuel went to Eli, who said, Tell me what the Lord said. Because he recognized the gift that Samuel had. And Samuel reminded him once again about the corruption in the priesthood, particularly amongst the sons of Eli. The people were without a king. They were without an overseer, and they were corrupt, and they did whatever they wanted, whatever they felt was best, irregardless of warnings, irregardless of the religious leaders. And seeing this, the people demanded a king. And Samuel warned them. But they had gone so far away from God, the true king, that in many respects, they no longer paid attention to right or wrong. What is the truth in the story of Samuel? The reality of the war, of the world that he was born into. The reality of his situation in serving the Lord and being called to prophesy to the people, to be a prophet. How does that speak to us? Because here we have a historical story that tells us about an outer landscape. But how does the story of Samuel feed our inner landscape? How does it mesh with our story? Where are you at? Are you adrift in a sea without direction, as they were in the time of Samuel? Were you called? Were you called by God for a particular mission in the world? Were you called by God? Or were you called by an earthly force? Because we cannot separate ourselves from history. History is part of who we are as a people. We are not individuals. Our stories are connected. Our actions give meaning to the world. We are a small part of history, and we are a small part of the world. But we all are here for a reason. We were born into the world we were born into for a reason. We just need to come to understand what that reason is. To reflect on that and to move forward with that as our star. The star that guides us, the light that guides us, the true King that guides us. And when God looks at our world these days, who and where is He revealing truth? So I end with that. Where are you in the story of Samuel? What role do you play in history? And how are you going to bring that role to fruition in 2021? And when 2021 comes to a close, what will your story have been? And where is truth in it?